Tonight, she walks back into the house that once destroyed her, not for forgiveness, not for love, but to light a match. The iron gates groan open like the jaws of a beast. Golden lights spill across the stone driveway, leading to a mansion where every smile is a weapon and every toast hides a lie. To the world, it is a charity gala. To her, it is a battlefield. And the man standing at the center of it, the man she should never love, is her ex-father-in-law. 3 years ago, she fled this dynasty in ruins, humiliated, betrayed, divorced from the golden boy everyone adored. Her name was dragged across tabloids like a curse. Now she lives in a cramped studio, patching together rent with coffee shop wages, watching her mother fade away in a hospital bed. Every bill is a blade, every cough a reminder, fight or vanish. And then came the envelope. Heavy ivory paper, no return address. Just one name, scrawled like a sentence carved in stone. Dominic Langston. Billionaire. Patriarch. Judge, jury, and executioner of a family that feeds on secrets. The last man she should see. The one who condemned her without ever asking why. She should have burned it. But hospital wards don't accept promises, only money. So she slipped into a borrowed black gown, painted her lips red like a warning, and stepped back into the lion's den. Inside, crystal chandeliers scatter light across faces polished into masks. Champagne flutes glitter, violins play too sweetly, and every laugh tastes of poison. She moves through it all with her chin high, her heartbeat hammering, every footstep a declaration. I came back. And then she sees him. Dominic. Broad shoulders wrapped in black silk, salt and pepper hair perfectly combed, eyes of cold steel that cut through the crowd like a blade. Time has not softened him, it has sharpened him. His presence bends the room around him, commands silence without a word. When his gaze finally lands on her, it is not surprise. It is recognition, a ghost returning to haunt him. She doesn't flinch. She crosses the marble floor to the bar, orders champagne with steady fingers, even as her pulse betrays her. She knows he is watching. And when his hand clamps around her wrist, the air cracks like a gunshot. Outside. Now. His voice is rough, low, dangerous. The winter air bites as he drags her into the garden. Behind them, the music continues as if nothing has happened. Roses bloom in expensive frost, but their thorns glisten sharper under moonlight. "What the hell are you doing here, Arya?" His words are venom. "You sent the invitation," she fires back. "I didn't think you'd come." "Then why send it? To see if you're still the same reckless girl who destroyed this family." Her laugh is bitter. "You know damn well why I left. Your perfect son ruined me. You just didn't want to see it." His eyes narrow, voice like gravel. "You ran. You couldn't face what you did." Her jaw tightens. "I came back because my mother is dying, because the Langstons owe me, for every lie, every door slammed in my face." For a moment, silence hangs heavy between them, broken only by the wind. Then his gaze drops, to her mouth, her throat, the bare skin lit by moonlight. What glimmers there is not only anger, it is hunger, the kind they've both denied for years. "I'll cover everything," he says finally. "The best doctors, the best care, whatever it takes." Her eyes narrow. In exchange for what? 1 month. You move back into this house. Work with me. Revive the Langston Foundation. And... His voice darkens. Stay out of the rooms, I forbid. She lets out a hollow laugh. A deal with the devil. Fitting. You'll say yes, he murmurs, because you'll do anything for your mother. And there it is, the truth laid bare, sharp and merciless. She should turn away. She should run. But when he leans closer, when her name leaves his lips like a scar reopened, Aria, her resolve trembles. You have no idea what you're walking into, he warns, eyes burning like storm clouds. She raises her chin. Then I'll just have to walk in to find out. Inside, applause erupts as another speech ends. But out here, in the frozen garden, another story begins. A story of revenge and forbidden fire. A story where love is both prison and escape. A story that will ask the questions no one dares answer. Why would a ruthless billionaire risk everything for the woman he blames? Can love survive when it's built on lies, hunger, and betrayal? And when the last secret is finally revealed, will it destroy them both? The truth, waiting behind a locked door at the end of the corridor, is far darker than she can imagine. She was born into scarcity, and every choice she made carried the weight of survival. Aria grew up watching her mother struggle against poverty, trading sleep for endless shifts, holding their tiny world together with scraps of hope. The streets she came from were a universe away from the marble floors and glittering chandeliers of the Langston dynasty. For her, wealth was always a window she pressed her face against, never a door she could walk through. That all changed when she met Landon Langston, the golden boy of a family whose empire stretched across Manhattan like a crown. To the outside world, he was charm and privilege embodied, the heir who had everything. To Aria, he was a promise of escape, of belonging to a life she had only dreamed of. But dreams can be crueler than reality, and hers curdled into scandal the moment she stepped into the spotlight beside him. At first, she played the role well. The borrowed gowns, the rehearsed smiles, the perfect wife who knew when to laugh and when to stay silent. She mastered the art of hiding her trembling hands beneath diamond bracelets. Yet no amount of polish could erase the whispers. The wives of Manhattan's elite called her an opportunist. The tabloids painted her as a scandal wrapped in satin. And through it all, she endured, until the night her marriage collapsed in public view, leaving her cast out and disgraced. She walked away, not with a severance of riches, but with a mountain of debt and a reputation stained so deeply it followed her into every coffee shop job, every landlord's office, every overdue hospital bill that landed like a blow across her chest. Her mother's illness became a chain around her ankle, dragging her deeper into desperation. Every time she begged for an extension or scraped coins together for another prescription, she thought of the world she once inhabited, the world that had spit her out. And at the center of that world stood Dominic Langston. He was everything his son wasn't, controlled where Landon was reckless, sharp where Landon was careless. Power wrapped itself around him like a second skin. When Aria first entered the family, Dominic had regarded her with the cold curiosity of a man measuring a rival. He believed she was unworthy, a distraction, the spark that would burn his empire from within. When the marriage crumbled, he never asked why. He simply delivered his verdict in silence. Guilty. To him, she was the woman who broke his sun and shamed his name. Yet beneath that disdain lived a history of shadows. Dominic's wife, Vivian, had died 2 years earlier in what the world called a tragic accident. The mansion still carried her ghost in perfume, lingering in the halls, locked doors no one dared open, and a grief Dominic buried beneath his relentless command of business and family. If Arya was shaped by hunger and humiliation, Dominic was carved by loss and rage. He was not merely a billionaire. He was a man who had spent decades building an empire from iron and sacrifice, only to watch it fracture under betrayal, addiction, and scandal. His reputation was unshakable, his wealth unmeasurable, his control absolute. Yet his eyes betrayed something darker, a man who had bled in silence, who wore armor not only to protect himself, but to keep the world at a distance. He could command entire rooms, silence reporters with a single glance, make politicians hesitate before speaking, but he could not control the ghosts that haunted his corridors or the hunger that grew each time Arya defied him. Their connection was forged not in sweetness, but in fire, a dangerous chemistry neither dared name. He saw her as a liability, yet he also saw her courage, her refusal to bow, the spark that could not be extinguished even when the world branded her as ruined. She saw him as the embodiment of the dynasty that destroyed her, yet also as the one man whose strength mirrored her own scars. Every glance between them was a battlefield, every word a weapon. Yet there was something else, something unspoken, threading itself through their hatred like smoke curling through locked doors. The night of the gala had reignited it, but the truth was that it had never truly died. It had always been there, an unholy tether binding a woman born in struggle to a man drowning in grief, dragging them both toward a destiny neither of them wanted, but neither of them could resist. And in the shadows of the Langston estate, beneath chandeliers and secrets, the stage was set. What began as an act of survival for Arya, and an assertion of control for Dominic, was about to unravel into something neither of them could contain. The mansion would not just test them, it would consume them, forcing them to confront the ghosts they carried and the fire they could no longer deny. The night of their reunion was not the end, but the spark of something far more dangerous. The garden air still clung to Arya's skin when she returned inside, but the moment she crossed the ballroom threshold, the room shifted. She could feel Dominic's eyes on her, an invisible tether that pulled even as she tried to resist. She moved through the sea of gowns and tuxedos, careful not to let her trembling show. Every champagne glass clinked like a countdown. She knew she should keep her distance, but fate rarely listens. It happened at the bar, a brush of presence, a hand that tightened around her wrist without warning, pulling her into the cold night where words cut sharper than the wind. What she hadn't expected was the tremor in his voice, the flicker in his eyes, the hunger that slipped through his armor of hatred. It was then she realized this war was no longer about survival alone. It was about temptation. Days later, the bargain became flesh. Dominic arrived not at a gala, but on the broken steps of her crumbling apartment building. He stood there in black, a shadow that did not belong in the neighborhood of peeling paint and rusted railings. His offer was clear. Her mother's life saved, in exchange for her return to the estate. The decision was less a choice than a sentence. When Arya walked up the marble staircase of Langston Manor again, It felt like walking into a gilded prison. The halls echoed with ghosts, the portraits watched with cold eyes, and behind every locked door lay secrets sharp enough to cut. She wore her defiance like armor, but even armor grows heavy. At dinners with donors, she smiled. At charity meetings, she performed her role flawlessly. But at night, when the mansion quieted, she could feel his presence pressing against her walls, testing, watching, waiting. The first clash came quickly. A glance across the library table lasted too long, his gaze drilling into her until her breath faltered. Every step became a silent duel, every conversation a skirmish of words edged with desire and danger. She swore she was playing him, edging closer only to uncover what he hid about his wife's death, about the locked room, about the dynasty that thrived on rot. But there were moments she betrayed herself, when the heat of his stare left her shaking, when the brush of his hand made her pulse quicken against her will. She told herself it was a tactic. She told herself it was revenge. Yet each night she lay awake, replaying every syllable, every look, every unspoken dare between them. Hatred had always been a mask, and now it was slipping, revealing something neither of them could contain. The breaking point came in a room lit by firelight. It began with a challenge. She accused him of hiding, of burying truth beneath rules and grief. He accused her of being a dangerous woman who had no place under his roof. The air thickened until words gave way to silence, a silence louder than any storm. Then, without warning, it shattered. His hand caught her wrist, the door slammed shut, and his mouth crashed against hers, with the force of years of denial collapsing into one reckless moment. It was not gentle. It was hunger, dressed as war, grief disguised as fury. For a heartbeat, she resisted, but only a heartbeat. Then she matched him, kiss for kiss, defiance for defiance, until fire roared where ice had been. When they finally pulled apart, breathless and burning, both knew a line had been crossed. There would be no return to the hatred they once claimed as truth. There was only this new, forbidden gravity pulling them into each other, deeper than either dared admit, darker than either could survive. And though neither spoke it aloud, they both understood. From this moment on, every secret, every betrayal, every locked door would lead them toward a collision that could destroy them both. The kiss did not end the war. It only sharpened it. By morning, Dominic avoided her, his seat at the dining table left empty, his name missing from the foundation's schedules. But absence did not erase the memory of his mouth on hers, or the heat that still burned beneath her skin. Arya carried it into every corridor of the mansion, every whispered conversation with board members, every forced smile in front of society's elite. Yet the more she tried to bury it, the more it consumed her. And soon it collided with something far more dangerous than desire. The secrets the Langston dynasty had spent decades hiding. Late one evening, while searching through the east wing, she discovered the locked door again, its keypad gleaming like a silent warning. And this time she found a way in. Inside was not emptiness, but a shrine. Journals lined in careful rows, perfume lingering in the air, letters tied with crimson ribbon that bled with Vivian Langston's despair. The truth was undeniable. She had not died untouched by malice. She had been pushed toward the edge by manipulation, betrayal, and whispers that pointed not only to Camille, but to the entire house of Langston. Arya's hands trembled as she read the words of a woman gaslit into oblivion. If this secret reached the light, the dynasty would shatter. But secrets are never unearthed without cost. Dominic found her there, holding the journals like weapons. His rage was immediate, his voice sharp enough to wound. Yet beneath the fury was something else. Fear. Fear of the truth. Fear of exposure. Fear of the ghosts he could not banish. They fought in the study, words slicing like knives, until she demanded to know why his wife had written about her. He faltered. He admitted fragments, half-truths cloaked as protection, but his silence said more than his words. Vivian had known about Arya before her death. She had seen the spark between them, and Dominic, for all his power, had buried that knowledge under grief and control. Arya felt the ground shift beneath her. She was no longer just a victim of the dynasty. She was a piece of the story that had destroyed it. As she wrestled with this revelation, other enemies closed in. Landon reappeared, his charm corroded into venom. He warned her to stay away from his father, called her a pawn in a game she could not win. His words echoed Camille's, who slithered through the mansion with smiles that hid daggers. Both knew Arya was dangerous because she was close. Too close to unraveling the web they had spun. When a family portrait vanished from the library, Camille seized the chance. Arya was accused of theft, paraded before Dominic as a liar and a traitor. She held the letters in trembling hands, begging him to see the truth, but betrayal had already been planted. Dominic's eyes, once blazing with hunger, turned cold again. With a single command, she was cast out of the house, the gates slamming behind her like a verdict. The taste of exile was bitter, but what hollowed her deeper was the nausea rising in her stomach, the realization whispered into the night. She was pregnant. The weeks that followed were a blur of escape. Arya vanished to the coast, trading chandeliers for a cottage with cracked windows, hiding under a false name. She tried to build silence around her, but silence does not erase destiny. News seeped through newspapers and whispers. The Langston Empire was unraveling. Dominic's control fractured. Camille tightened her claws. Landon dragged the family name through filth. Yet even as the dynasty burned, Arya could not escape the tether. One night, Dominic appeared at her door, worn down by battles, his power stripped bare. He saw the ultrasound on her table, proof of a life neither of them had expected, a life conceived in fire and shadow. His voice cracked as he asked the question she had dreaded. "Is this mine?" The answer bound them again, not with desire alone, but with blood, with future, with a secret too fragile to survive the storm. But the storm was already here. Camille struck back, orchestrating Arya's abduction, binding her in a room that stank of concrete and betrayal. For the first time, Arya realized how much her life had become currency in a game she never asked to play. Yet even tied to a chair, bruised and bleeding, she refused to break. She thought of her mother, of the child inside her, of Dominic's face when he swore he would protect her. And when he finally tore through the door, ripping the ropes from her wrists, she understood that their bond was not just temptation anymore. It was survival. Together, they stood before cameras and crowds, exposing Camille's manipulation, dragging Landon's disgrace into the light, dismantling the empire brick by poisoned brick. Dominic renounced his dynasty. The Langston crown crumbled. But the price was steep. Their names stained, their peace fragile, their child fighting for life in a hospital ward where every breath was a prayer. In the end, their love was no longer a question of desire. It was a question of endurance. Could two people born from ruin build something unbreakable? Or would the ghosts of their past consume them before they ever had the chance? The answer waited not in the halls of the mansion, but in the fragile cry of a newborn fighting to live. The collapse of the Langston dynasty did not bring peace. It brought reckoning. After the truth spilled into the open, after Camille was unmasked and Landon destroyed himself in scandal, the empire Dominic had ruled for decades was ashes. The man who once commanded boardrooms and silenced rivals now stood stripped of power, carrying only his guilt, his grief, and a fragile hope that love could be rebuilt from ruin. Arya stood beside him, no longer the disgraced outcast who had stumbled into his world, but a woman who had faced betrayal, exile, and near death, and still endured. Yet survival came at its highest cost. The stress of secrets, the violence of betrayal, the nights of hunger and fear, all of it bore down on her body until the moment she doubled over, clutching her stomach, gasping the words that froze Dominic's heart. "It's the baby." The hospital was a blur of sterile lights and desperate hands. Machines screamed, doctors shouted, and Dominic, once the unshakable patriarch, fell to his knees in prayer. Arya gripped his hand with all the strength she had left, whispering through her tears that she would not lose this child, that they had fought too hard for this life to vanish before it began. Hours stretched into eternity, each contraction a battle, each silence between the beeping monitors a knife twisting deeper. When at last the cry came, thin but alive, both parents broke into sobs of relief. Their daughter was small, fragile, but she breathed. Against every shadow, against every curse that had haunted the Langstons, she lived. They named her Ella, and in her tiny fists, wrapped around Arya's finger, Dominic saw something he had never known before: salvation. But even as they rocked her in the quiet glow of a nursery lamp, the past refused to stay buried. An envelope arrived, slipped under their door like a ghost returning to claim its due. The message was short, the words as sharp as a knife. "You do not know the full truth of your blood." Arya's father was not who you believed. His fate was bound to the Langstons in ways you cannot imagine. Fear coursed through her as she realized her story was not finished, that her very blood carried secrets older than her shame, deeper than Dominic's grief. Yet when she turned to him, tears in her eyes, his hand closed over hers with steady strength. "We face it together," he said. And for the first time, she believed him. Their love was not soft, not simple, not born of fairy tales. It was forged in fire, in scandal, in the ruins of a dynasty that devoured its own. It was love that felt like a prison and a key all at once. They had been enemies, pawns, betrayers. But standing over their daughter's crib, hearing her fragile breaths, they became something else entirely. Survivors who chose each other in spite of everything. The world could call it forbidden, dangerous, a mistake written in blood. But to them, it was truth. The kind of truth that burns away lies, even if it leaves scars. In the end, Arya did not find freedom by leaving the Langston estate. She found it in returning, tearing down its walls and planting new life in its ashes. And Dominic, the man who had once been her executioner, became her fiercest protector. Love in darkness had nearly destroyed them, but in the light of their daughter's first dawn, it offered something they had never known before: redemption. So the question that haunted them from the beginning was answered at last. Was this love a cage, or was it deliverance? The truth lay in the cry of a newborn child, in the vow whispered between broken souls, in the decision to walk into the future not as prisoner and captor, but as two survivors bound by a fire that no betrayal could extinguish. And for those who watched their story unfold, one truth remains unshakable. Sometimes love is not the opposite of ruin. Sometimes love is what rises from it.